Okay, so welcome to our esteemed panelists. I'm here at SSGS, and we had a good start of the morning, some great content. So we're looking forward to our experts here adding to that. And if you can all please introduce yourselves, give a little background on your organizations and your companies. So we'll start with Alex at the far end.
Simply, CTO, the GSOA. That's the trade association for all the mobile operators around the world. We've got 700 of those, that's virtually all of them. We've got about 400 other members, including quite a number of satellite companies as well. So as CTO, I'm responsible obviously for the after all of the technical side of the business. Of interest to you guys is that we've recently launched an NTN community, and in fact some of the other panelists are we've got cooperation agreements with, or a part of that as well. So I've been in the industry for 40 years, and I did spend 8.5 years in satellite just before I joined the GSOA. When I got there, Isabelle was already there, and then she left to join satellites. Serendipity.
Good morning, everyone. You've already heard from myself. I'm Henny, Head of Telecommunications at the UK Space Agency. I've been in post for about 6 or 7 years now, working across the satellite domain in that time.
Isabelle Mauro, I'm Director General of GSOA. We are the trade association for the satellite industry. We have both GEO, MEO, LEOs, operator vendors, but also ground segment, of course, operators. Our role, just I guess like the GSMA for the mobile operators, is to work with our membership to make sure that the whole environment from business to policy is in place and helpful and promoting innovation and investment and growth. And as Alex said, I joined GSOA 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Prior to that, I was with the World Economic Forum leading the tech industry. But I did spend 15 years prior to that at the GSMA working in international relations. Thank you.
Kevin?
Thanks, Kevin. So my name is Jamie Reid. I look after the commercial SATCOM and Earth observation business in CGI in the UK. So for those who don't know, CGI is a large IT systems integrator. So one of the biggest in the world, about 93,000 people around the world. And our space business has been running for, I think we signed our first space contract in 1976. So I'll let you do the maths. It's not quite 50 years, but getting there. And so our space business is essentially working with satellite operators, the European Space Agency, UK Space Agency, space entities and companies to help them develop end-to-end solutions to operate their systems, their networks and their spacecraft. So we do everything from high-end IT consulting, business systems, the sort of CRM, billing, those sorts of things, all the way down to network operation systems, satellite control systems, terminal management systems, and onboard software as well. So many of the EO satellites are flying around the Earth at the moment, built by ESA, running on our software. So we've been working very closely with the satellite operators to realise their ambitions in implementing 5G in particular in the LEO space. So looking forward to having that conversation with you today.
Thank you. Hello everybody, good morning everybody. My name is Antonio Franchi. I'm with the European Space Agency. Very nice to see you all here, and very nice for you to host the conference in London, which is the town where I live for more than 25 years. My background, my professional career is satellite communication all the way. Not quite 40 years, Alex. I've been about 35 years in the SATCOM community. After a brief work at ESA, where I worked in London for Inmarsat for more than 20 years, and various other companies. And then for the last 8 years, I'm back at ESA, where I lead a group called Space for 5G and 6G. The group is all about mobile convergence, promoting the convergence between terrestrial and non-terrestrial network. And at ESA, being a space innovation agency, we work with all other European agencies like UKSA and many others, and also globally around the world with Canada and many other space agencies. In my case, to promote the space competitiveness of Europe, in particular the convergence of terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks. Thank you.
Okay, so, I mean, a few years back, we wouldn't actually be all sitting on the same panel, I don't think. It would be kind of in different rooms. Cross-industry collaboration between GSMA, GSOA and ESA, just to start really, with what we're expecting. And of course, your respective members, I think that's important to say as well. Where are we at with these initiatives and what can we expect in terms of progress for the future? I'll start with Alex again from the fine.
Well, I would say that we've been working closely with Isa and Antonia for a while now. But prior to that, we had all of the individual satellite companies coming towards us as well. We've had quite a few of them as members for a number of years, and they've been working with our technical working groups. But as you can see with NTN, the standardization's done. We've got the first real stuff in sort of release 17, and now we're moving on. But as Isa alluded to earlier, there's a lot of kind of practical policy, business, commercial stuff you have to do to make it a reality. And that's where organizations like ourselves come in. I would say that with ESA in particular, we're stressing the innovation side. So we've got a challenge that's launched together with our GSMA Foundry and ESA. And there's effectively a funding of around 15 million euros, I think it is, Antonio. We've had 18 applicants, again, joint members basically, doing cool stuff in there. And as Isa said, we've got a lot of policy stuff that we need to look at. We're starting small. We're looking at some practical testing things to do, particularly with IoT modules to make sure that the new sort of release 17 compliant modems can be certified quite quickly as well. So we're starting small, but we're also compiling a white paper with essentially a list of issues and challenges that we want to jointly address.
Very good. Henny, do you have any comments on what you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. So we've been working with ESA for a few years, and we actively sponsored ESA to take part in, I think it was release 17. And our plan for the future is to increase our contribution to ensure that the current schedule of releases stays on track. I think this morning we've already seen that there is competition for implementing those standards. So we need to really stay on track. And I would echo your words as well. As innovation funders, it's imperative that the companies we support are using the standards, commercializing the standards and rolling them out to customers.
I think there are a couple of things. One is at a higher level. It's also a question of perception and collaboration and attitudes and behaviors. And I think, I really want to stress this because I come from the mobile industry. And the first meeting I went to when I joined GSOA was a Spectrum meeting, ITU meeting. And I'd never worked on Spectrum closely. And I just couldn't believe the tension in the room. And I just thought, oh my God, the first thing I really need to focus on is how are we going to bring these two communities much closer together? And Alex, you're right, we've been working together. We've always had backhaul and other areas. But I think changing that sort of behavior, it's not because we've been fighting for Spectrum for years that we need to continue doing that. And I think that is really a psychological more than a business or policy, but it's really a sort of an attribute that we need to work on. One of the things we did, with Alex, with his counterparts, is at the Mobile World Congress this year, we signed a cooperation agreement. And that was really important to us because it also sets the mind of all our colleagues in both industries that we are really working towards the same direction. So at a higher level, I think that is really important. We did the same thing with ESA. We signed a cooperation agreement, and I think closing the loop between our three organizations is really critical. Where we are and where we're going, in terms of standards, I think that has been probably the easiest piece. NTN, I heard this morning that the telcos were driving NTN integration. I would not agree with that. I think we've really been working together, and release 17 was really a big factor, and where the NTN community has really contributed, and we are seeing really a sort of synergy where we are more and more working together. So that is good. Policy is going to be a little bit more lengthy, I would say, because of course there are issues of policy, of Spectrum, and as we know, we are still a long way. But again, I think we are seeing more and more willingness to collaborate. And finally, I think one which is not necessarily for the trade associations to address because there is a business commercial element, but nonetheless, we can put the framework in place, is finding the right business models. Because I think if, one of the parties in these collaborations, which are going to become business collaborations for operators, there is only one winner and one loser, it's not going to work. So it's, I think, our responsibility as industry associations to make sure that there is a well-balanced distribution of the business model so that it can work in the future.
In a different perspective, it must be going against Flavian Villas.
Yeah, I think so. From an industrial perspective, we don't get involved in setting the standards. We are the poor people who have to implement them. As with many people in the audience, I expect. So, what I would say is, please go quicker. If I'm honest, there's a huge tension in our customers, who are the satellite operators and the telcos. So we work with the telcos as well, between proprietary and standards-based approaches, and you see that in the market. Coming to your point, Isabelle, about the relationship between the different entities and the telcos and the SATCOM operators, I think there are several different business models being approached simultaneously, and it's not clear what the right one is yet. I think many people in this room would probably hope that it's a standards-based approach, but there's no guarantee that will be the successful model that's implemented, not least because some of the actors have very, very deep pockets and are looking to kind of get the biggest market share possible, and that's going to happen before the standards are fully in place and so on. So the standards, I think, do need to go more quickly. It's great to see GSMA and GSOA working together. I think that's something that from the space industry we've needed for many, many years, and it's great to finally see it happen. We've been talking about it. I think now the rubber needs to hit the road on getting those standards in place, doing the testing, getting the test facilities in place, so that interoperability can actually be demonstrated in the real world and be shown to bring value to the end customers and to the MNOs as well, seeing them as customers for the satellite industry, and helping them to realise new revenue streams, because ultimately that's what it's all about. All of this is a bit pointless if the MNOs are not able to realise that new revenue stream. When we talk about convergence, so it's great to see. I think it's a fantastic start. Let's accelerate it, and I'm certainly keen that we get involved with that too.
Yeah, very good.
I agree. I agree with everything. Thank you, Kevin. I think the topic of this round question was about collaboration and partnership, cooperation, which was kind of the end of the previous panel. That is an essential element for this industry to thrive. And here we're talking about scaling up the opportunity, the challenge for the satellite industry. And in this panel, I think I'm really proud to be part of this panel and to have created this open collaboration between the terrestrial MNO community represented by the GSMA, by the SNO, Satellite Network Operator Community represented by GSOA, and I guess ESA, UKSA represented the space industry innovation and funding, and of course also with CGI, for which we have a special partnership with our ESA hardware office, where CGI is our partner in the creation of the 5G 6G hub, which is a visible manifestation of the mobile convergence that we try to promote. I think a lot of things have been said. What's important here is a factor of scale. So for our space industry to thrive and to benefit of the so-called 5G, 6G economy, it's important that there is a huge, tremendous opportunity, which an order of magnitude higher than what the space community has been looking at so far, at least, or perhaps 2 orders of magnitude. People talking about tens of trillions of dollars in the next 10 years of the global economic output of 5G, 6G. For satellite to play an effective part of it, we must collaborate and create partnership at this level. Just to give 2 examples, which perhaps not been mentioned yet, GSMA launched the GSMA NTN community a few months ago, of which of course we are partners, and so as well is participating. That is very, very powerful and relevant, that coming from the terrestrial MNO world, create an NTN community to harmonize and create inputs for standard, for policy, for regulation, for spectrum, as you mentioned, very, very important with global aspect. In parallel, to reinforce this community, ISA promoted the NTN Forum. Last month, we launched the NTN Forum, of which, again, GSOA, CGI, and GSMA are partners. The NTN Forum was launched in July, so last month, a couple of months ago, and today counts about 250 members, 150 global organizations across 27 countries. So from all come from MNO, SNO industry, terrestrial industry, satellite industry. So I think from this industry to thrive, it's important that we're not afraid to sit at the same table, as you mentioned. It's important to sit at such a big table. The only way to sit at this table to have a global impact is to have partnership at this level with all representation from industry and our traditional space manufacturer to be open, to be free to participate to this table. And thanks to some of institutional funding provided by space agencies like ESA, UKSA, and many others, to bring up the competitiveness level of this industry, to play at a much bigger table to address not only the needs of industry and society for the next 10 years, but also to make sure that the space sector continue to go along what we have been promoting so far. Yes, Release 17 is a good achievement, and Isabelle and myself were very proud to receive the Technology of the Year award earlier in June at the Satellite Show on behalf of the space industry. But that's just the beginning. Release 18, 19, and forward is important. The implementation of the standards in the seamless network of the future is important, and the impact that collectively we can make on industry and society is equally important. I believe this kind of partnership is essential to drive that forward, and I'm, again, very proud to be part of it. I hope we can continue to grow the NTN forum community, whatever we call it, into a very global, powerful body which can influence these future standards.
Okay, so moving on to the very important part. A fastly evolving ecosystem inevitably brings regulatory and technology challenges. How can these challenges be best addressed? And Antonio, I'll start with you this time.
All right, thank you. Maybe I'll be brief since I already spoke about. Yes, I think the challenges and opportunities. We are a strong advocate of global standards in order to have an open playing competition among all the players, in order to provide interoperability and to allow the realization of the economies of scale, where satellite and ground eventually becomes two elements of a global, seamless, connected ecosystem. So global standard for us is not a challenge, it's an opportunity that we strongly believe space community should embrace and help to influence, advise, and drive some of the global standards to make sure that the interests of space and the space sector are considered as part of these global standards. Policy, yes, of course, I think there are many much more able people here to talk about policies, but regulation, spectrum management, fair use of spectrum, and global policy is very, very important. I think Alex already alluded that some of this white paper we are collectively producing will address some of these challenges. At least we will identify what the challenges are for the global community to address and be informed on. But again, is not discussing that in a closed room that we're gonna tackle those, but actually open up and discuss a wider forum, global policy, and standard regulation that will make it happen. I'll leave the floor to much better esteemed experts on that.
Jimmy, do you want to pick it up?
Yeah, I guess I would focus on the service layer in terms of innovation, and where I feel a lot of work needs to still be done. I think we talked a lot about technology earlier today, and I think we all know what the applications of SATCOMs are and what they could be. Henny talked about that earlier, but that service layer, I think it was mentioned about ordering, satellite capacity on the internet and so on. That's been around for a few years. That's got easier, but there's still a huge amount of work to be done in making these services easier to use. And I think that's where regulation and government policy have a really strong role to play. That speaks very much to convergence as well. If we look at what the FCC are doing in the US, they're really on the front foot of regulatory innovation in terms of not just allowing SATCOM access to mobile spectrum, but also opening up some of the MSS spectrum, for example. So that's a model, I think, the rest of the world can look at. I know there's a consultation that Ofcom are doing at the moment, for example. Please, everybody contribute to that. But this interplay of the service layer, making it just a lot easier to use, a lot easier to integrate, I think is where the focus needs to be. It's why it's great to see GSOA and GSOA getting involved, ISA. But it's also the area where we see, to be frank, probably the least investment. If you look at industrial investment, we invest a lot in technologies, we invest in satellites, but that service layer and to some extent the applications layer does see probably the least investment, because it's also the most difficult. It's quite easy to say, I'll have another satellite and I'll make it better than the last one. That's okay. I mean, it's hard to build, but it's there's a trend there that you can follow. It's easy to justify, but coming up with a new idea in terms of service management and implementing it with all the actors involved, government, the customers, the MNOs, this complex environment, that's really hard to bring together. So I'd love to see, as an industry, us working much more on that collaborative side, building on what's already been said today. And I think ISA, for example, has a great role to play there along with the Space Agency.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie.
Well, I think on the two policy, we are going through a disruption, like the satellite sector itself, space sector is being massively disrupted. But as you said, we're going through a convergence. And, 10, 15 years ago when I was at the GSMA, we had that with broadcast and we have now moved. It's satellite and mobile. So I think in terms of policy, there is really a need now to have regulatory frameworks, policies that are more agile, that are more flexible, that feels to standards as well. You were saying the different pace between standards bodies and policymakers, and I don't know if there are any in the room, and the pace at which industry is evolving. So we really have, making that sort of alignment is really hard, right? Because we know that a cycle, even look at WRC, it takes 4 years, to get through. In 4 years, SpaceX went from there to there, or Starlink. So we really need to think quicker and policy. We work with policymakers more closely so that we align that pace. We also need policies that are technology neutral, because we are clearly going through a world that is converging. So policymakers need to support all technologies in a neutral way. And then I think there is a need definitely for more agile and flexibility in spectrum management. You were mentioning and how this is going to evolve, authorizations regimes. How are we going to work on this together? From a technology point of view, I guess it's more about interoperability and compatibility. Compatibility of networks, but not just networks, from the A to Z, the whole value chain. It's not just about the networks, it's also about the handsets, everything that needs. So there we really need to make sure that, whatever is working for a mobile system is also compatible with the specificities of the satellite system. And I think that's where sitting together at the table and going through these really nitty-gritty details of how it's working is really important. And on standards, of course, we need to continue the good work, but agree with you that we need to speed up the pace, because some players out there are just not waiting for things to evolve. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think government steps in with regulation where standards stop or where standards fail. And I think optical technology is a really good example, where for a long time people enjoyed the idea of it being a Wild West, where they could do what they want, they could create what they want. But what happened was no one invested in it, because there was no interoperability, there was no standardization. With the SDA transport layer standards coming in, it was a standard that was unpopular, but it was a standard. And we saw a huge amount of investment happen afterwards. So standards are absolutely essential to realize the benefits of the different technologies. And where those standards aren't in place or they fail, then governments will step in and will regulate as well. So I think it's really critical that standards are prioritized. We'll be prioritizing standardization first and interoperability. And government will should be the fallback on safety and security. But where there isn't standardization, there will be more regulation. I think the other part of this is it's a really fast-moving environment as well. So So there will be regulation and there will be standards that people don't want or don't like, or that people propose to unlock their investment as well. And I would say the important thing is to talk to standards bodies, engage with standards bodies, so that you have a role and you have a voice. And then you can complain if you don't listen. But talk to us as well about regulation and the future of regulation so that we can make sure it's targeted and appropriate.
Okay, Alex.
So I'll keep it brief because now I'm at the other end. They've said most of it. For me, Isa mentioned technology neutrality. We just know that's really important. On the TN side, if you like, we wasted so much energy fighting a whole bunch of technical wars that were utterly pointless. CDMA, TDMA, GSM, WiMAX, you name it. And in the end, scale wins. And that's why I don't have any concerns about standards winning. They are slow. The standard setting process is slow, but as long as everybody sticks to those standards, the economies of scale you get as a result are orders of magnitude higher. And that is what the satellite industry badly needs, particularly on the device side, if we're talking direct to device. The other thing I would say is regulation can be enabling regulation. And in a field that's innovative and changing fast, it's a very tough job for a regulator. If you regulate too early, you're probably going to act as a brake. So for us to talk to regulators and make them understand how things really work, what the issues are, because they're not necessarily very well versed. We spend a lot of time, as Isa knows as well, talking to regulators and trying to explain to them how things really work. I think we can help them to produce more enabling regulation rather than something that's done at haste that you would later regret.
Very good. Okay, let's try this one. See who picks this one up. What is the impact of 5G on the ground segment? Jamie?
So start. Yeah, I'll have a go at starting anyway. So I think we're seeing it in several different areas. I think the two main areas are on the RAN side. Let's call it the RAN side. I think in the spacecraft world, we don't always call it RAN, but the radio access network, and then the core side. So on the radio side, we're beginning to see IoT, NB-IoT, coming into play. NB-IoT is not a 5G standard, but let's imagine it is. And there are several companies out there who are looking to use standards-based IoT from space, or a couple are doing it today. You're already beginning to see them getting traction in the market because they're standards-based, right? And that gives the customers, so thinking about the end-to-end value chain, it gives the customers confidence that they're not locked into a particular provider. Maybe they are today because there's only one provider, but in 5 years' time, there's probably 5 or 6, right? So suddenly that investment becomes a lot more obvious and a lot easier for them to justify. So I think that we will see this scale up of particularly NB-IoT devices using space spectrum. I think new radio will come, and we see several companies looking at doing that, from LEO and from MEO and GEO. It's obviously a lot harder from GEO, but there are companies actively looking at that. So, and I think what we'll see is when that begins to materialise, what we're just beginning to see now with NB-IoT, we'll see for mobile broadband. We'll see maybe one company begin to start doing it. We'll see users begin to pick it up. And then 5 or 6 years later, there'll be 3, 4, 5 maybe companies offering it broadband from space using new radio. So I think that's going to be quite transformative. And that's not just for mobile devices. I think once you've got a cheap, low-cost, standardized terminal, and I think as alluded to earlier, why would you use anything else, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? So I think that's going to really, really drive change in our industry. On the other side, I think we've got the core, and probably not everyone realizes it, but quite a few of the GEO systems today use a 4G core already, okay? So that technology is already understood by the satellite operators. We'll see that evolve to 5G. We'll see some of the 5G specific core features without needing to use new radio. We'll see those core features begin to offer value to those satellite operators through things like virtualization, through simplification of interfaces, the use of common OSS and BSS, for example. We're already seeing our customers really interested in that because it enables them to modernize their entire IT system. So we'll see that coming through. Whether or not we'll see satellite-specific features go into the 5G cores, I'm not so convinced about. And partly that's because of scale. Satellite operators are relatively small in the telco world, so why would a 5G core, and I mean a serious 5G core operator, spend a lot of time and effort developing those satellite-specific features in their core products? It's difficult for them to make the return on investment. There are a few smaller companies who are doing 5G cores specifically for space. So we'll have to see how that market shakes out. But it's definitely happening. It's a trend, and we are going to see probably most flight operators, I suspect, move to 5G cores in the next few years. So yeah, we've got two tracks running there, and both of them I think will transform the ground segment that we see today.
Any takers?
Yeah, I think you alluded to one problem earlier on. Slavery is more than the service layer. It's basically exposing assets so that people can easily consume. Now, that's a problem we have on the ground as well. So we have a huge initiative called Open Gateway. Not a great title, but it does what it says on the tin. So it's basically opening up a whole bunch of APIs to expose 5G capabilities, because that's the only way we're going to monetize 5G on the ground. Just selling faster broadband to consumers does not really pay back on all of that CapEx investment. So I think part of the answer there is definitely to open up APIs. And one of the challenges that we've set with ESA as well is to see if we can use some specific APIs there with the NTN community as well. We've done it already with drones. They wanted a specific API. They wanted to know the population density of people under a flight path so they could manage the risk. That's something we would never have come up with. But the good thing about APIs is they're relatively easy to do, provided the system is there and the system is structured the right way. If you have a 5G core, it's more like an IT problem than it used to be like a box problem. So that's an important part of the change as well. It's not just the network becoming soft, it's exposing it so that you can basically crowdsource innovation. I mean, neither terrestrial nor satellite have been great in coming up with thousands of new services, right? Crowdsource it to millions of developers, which is what we're doing now. And they'll come up with stuff you never even thought of. And that's good news, because we all need to monetize the investment.
Very good.
Yeah, so maybe I strongly support that. Indeed, one of the challenges we commonly launched was about the open gateway to NTN APIs, which is very, very important. So the service layer is very important. Maybe we come back to that. But also I'd like to endorse what James just said. First of all, 5G and narrowband IoT is a 5G service standard. It's going to be standardized as 5G. But I think 5G means on the ground, it means a lot of different things to different people. And I think some of the debate was very, very nicely addressed in the previous panel, where what does it mean having a 5G network or ground segment? Does it mean necessarily having an NR, NTN, air interface of a satellite? That's one understanding, right? So yes, implement the entire 5G protocol stack, including the air interface and non-terrestrial network radio, is one example. This is the ultimate goal. But in order for user to benefit for the service to be provided seamlessly across, that's not really necessary. You can use any network or a satellite. You can use DVB. You can use all kind of other proprietary network. What's important is that the core network, the ground network, are seamlessly integrated with terrestrial networks at BSS level, OSS level, and also the quality of service level, where there is an intelligent orchestration of radio capacity over terrestrial and non-terrestrial, which respect or comply with 5G standards, whether there is an interworking function, as mentioned before, which translates satellite language into terrestrial 5G language or not, is irrelevant. What counts is the end-to-end service delivery, which is 5G based, 5G enabled, or providing open 5G API, open gateway API, and so on. So there will be a different level for the ground segment community to latch on this 5G train and then 6G train, and different level of integration. The most important one is the end-to-end service integration, where the users and the services don't differentiate whether it's transmitted over satellite or terrestrial. Of course, all the BSS, OSS integration is very important. And ultimately, for the end-user device, to reach the scale of the devices that Alex was alluding, including satellite connectivity, in that case, yes, it would be important to implement the 5G NTN new radio in the device, because that is a common device which will be talking 5G in that case, and benefit of 5G economies of scale, both terrestrial and satellite. So I wouldn't exclude, or in fact, at ESA, we support all flavor of 5G integration from the ground and space segment community, leading towards full integration, which is supported eventually NTN over the air interface of a satellite, and having perhaps user terminal chipset which support an RNTN. So it's a very, very large discussion, but in general, I agree. Let's focus on the service level first, open API, and then slowly achieve the full integration, which would unlock the economies of scale.
Does anyone want to pick up more on that integration on the?
Sorry, not so much on integration, just on that service layer, really. I think it's absolutely essential. And I think in order for 5G to achieve its potential, then we need that end-to-end infrastructures enabled on integrated networks. The impact on the ground segment will be enormous. So there will be different kinds of customers, different kinds of operators to work with who aren't really interested in satellites, who are just like their end users. They don't see satellites as that exciting. They don't want to pay lots of money for it. And I think that shift isn't just an end user shift. It will be right the way through the business value chain as well.
Isabelle?
Well, I think the words, that are user, because your user, and whether the user is a B2C, B2B, whatever, it's an enterprise or a single, I think the user at the end of the day doesn't care whether your service is via satellite or via, terrestrial or non-terrestrial. So it's really important that we nail that, and that the interoperability and the whole chain is really working, because they won't care. And the other thing is the price point as well. What is going to be the price point? Because in the minds of people, satellite services are still very expensive. I think we are seeing things change on the market, on the ground. But those are going to be all important elements. And then, 5G so far, we haven't seen this great potential of 5G yet. And I think, Alex, you mentioned it. I remember, and you will remember with me, 3G. We went on for 3G for years and years and years, talking about the hype about 3G. And maybe, I'm saying this out of my own personal view, not as GSOA or GSMA. I think that the iPhone is what made the common, user understand what 3G potential was, because they came up with a product that was easy to use and where, 3G completely exploded. And you may agree or disagree, but to me, as I see it like that. So I think with 5G, we will also need to find this kind of killer app, because you can have all the technology, all the interoperability, everything that you want. But if we don't find something that is going to open the appetite of the single user, private user, or the enterprise, it's not going to be the full potential exploited.
That's good. Do we have any questions from the audience? Does anyone want to?
And we're on a mic.
I can't help with CGI. I think we had a very good discussion about the improvement from standardization and the convergence of 5G standards, CPV and NTNs. I think building on the last point, a lot of these services are actually being sold by telecom operators. Have a lot of investment in terrestrial services. So what can we do to influence encouraging the Telecom sort of use cases, but make satellite more relevant than we're important?
So basically, I'll take a stab at that. And I think the important thing to realize is, and most people don't, we have our own research unit. It's called GSOA Intelligence. And we have an NTN and satellite tracker. We're tracking at the moment 91 partnership agreements between large MNOs and satellite operators. Now, Isa alluded to it earlier, 55% of that is backhaul. We've been doing that for decades. But 45% isn't. And if you look at the number of terrestrial operators that have invested directly in people like AST Space Mobile, if you look at them, the ones signing the partnership deals with Link and Starlink, AST, all the other guys, you can see that there is clearly interest there. I think we can do two things. The first thing is to showcase what works, and that's where the innovation comes in. It's the same in 5G terrestrial, by the way. We have a whole raft of really good use cases coming out of China or elsewhere. There are at scale, but we're not at that point across the world. So if we can pick some use cases, and we're starting with easy stuff like IoT that a couple of the guys mentioned, there are some absolute no-brainers there. There are guys doing actually urban management in Korea. DT's doing something with swift navigation on precise positioning, a few centimeters. If we can get people to see that those are commercial, and if people are realistic about the price points that you can charge for those things, that's when things start to roll. And I think that's what we jointly can start the ball rolling. We won't complete it, but that's what's necessary. I think on the ground as well, we're seeing the same thing with 5G to business, as we call it. There are fantastic examples all over the world, but it's not catching on because we're having to create new sectors, new businesses, new agreements, new intersections, not just whack another tariff package on top of a consumer.
I think it's also trying to showcase, what is it that satellite is going to bring to the 5G that you currently have, which is, the coverage and the range that currently where maybe terrestrial, the investment is too expensive and the terrestrial network doesn't get there. That's where we can really bring a lot of value. And, we were talking about digital transformation before. I think that's where the satellite can really help accelerate digital transformation, because we can go where, maybe other networks cannot go. And once you bring this digital transformation to areas of the world, in developing economies, but also in the developed world where we don't have, that's where you really create a lot of value, both economically but socially as well, where we can really bring people online and help that. So I think, it's good that you asked that question, because then what you mentioned about the use cases, because clearly we need to do a better job at showcasing what actually can be achieved. And thank you. You've just given us a task to do that together.
Okay. So we're running out of time here, but I've got lots of questions that I'll probably follow up with you guys later. But what should be our delegates' takeaway after this conversation about the 5G and the satellite and what you experts are all trying to achieve and provide us? So key takeaway for our delegates, to start with the far end with Alex.
How to say this, because of the nature of who we are. The key takeaway should be that NTN and TN are collaborating, not just signing bits of documents and MOUs. We could do that every day of the week. We are genuinely working together. We know that we won't agree on every single detail. That's normal in the business world. You can be a fierce competitor in one sector and an absolute partner in another. You just have to be grown enough to recognize it. I think it's a bit like this just with our members on the ground. We agree on about 95% of stuff, but we'll argue interminably about the 5%. If we can just put that to one side, we can make great strides. And I think the fact we've got so many different representatives here, all saying that we're trying to work together and actually trying to do it, that's the takeaway from us.
Thanks, Alex. Henny?
I think it's the point about the service layer, really, that the 5G is a technical implementation, but ultimately it's a commercial service layer, and it's going to be your future customers. So you should be very flexible, very adaptive to the changes that are coming.
Thanks, Henny. Isabelle?
Well, I want to mirror what Alex said. Clearly, I think I could have said it better. But I think it's also that in 5 years' time, if we were sitting here in 5 years' time, I think we will be looking at a very different world. I personally believe that the WRC next one in 27 and then in 31, if I calculate way, will be very different from what we've experienced so far. But it will be a world where we will have been able to leverage the best of all technologies and bring them together to deliver this digital transformation to the 2.6 billion people that are still not connected.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, I think I echo and agree with everything that's just been said. I think it's just moving so quickly. We need to collaborate. We need to go more quickly. There are companies out there who are just getting on with it. I think that was mentioned. Very deep pockets. If we want to be competitive, then we need to put the investment in the right place. It is getting more complex, unfortunately. That means we need to collaborate more, means we need more standardization. It also means that we need to be very focused on what we're doing. This is going to happen anyway, and that's the other point. All this transformation we're talking about, it's just going to happen. And if we as industry and our individual companies are not on that train and not focused on being on that train, helping our customers, then in 5 years' time we won't be in the industry. That's what's happening right now. So we need to really focus on what we're doing, and we need to work together. And the standards bodies and GSOA, the trade associations, have a really key role to play in that, and industry needs to do its part too.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with everything. Collaboration is key among these wider industries. Perhaps one thing we didn't talk about, it's a satellite conference, so I think it's a huge opportunity for this community, for the space community. We didn't talk about technologies going forward and from 5G to 6G, but what we see is that the intelligence, the growth of this intelligence, whether artificial intelligence in the network, in space, in services, in everything, is demanding more and more connectivity together with security. On the other hand, the mixed reality world, which is the use of industrial metaverse, augmented reality, virtual reality, things we didn't touch here. These are trends which will independent from us, but they're going to have more and more impact in the economies of the future. And this together with being aware of this AI and mixed reality applications into the satellite community is very important. So abiding to global standards and preparing the connectivity mesh network of the future is a unique opportunity for this industry to step up from proprietary bespoke solution only for rich space users to become mass market provider of the networks of the future, to capitalize on these new technologies and contribute to the economies of the future for industry and society. So for me, it's the huge opportunities for the industry. We're trying to advocate as best as we can and support with the limited financial means that we have as a collective space industry to prepare this industry here to be competitive in the future and serve the need of the society of the future.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our panel.